I think there's value in all sorts of players in the field, but just one example from our experience, we've been working in Sierra Leone.
Simon, you should say who you are, in case people don't know.
I'm Simon Gill, I work for ODI, and I head up our public finance and institutions work. We've been working in Sierra Leone, where they have large TA programs from the World Bank, from the EU, and also from DFID, but from the Sierra Leonean government point of view, they don't provide them with the problem-driven support that they need. So the Sierra Leonean government have given resources to ODI from their own resources to do what they really want. So my push to the donors would be to give small amounts of flexible funding to partner governments so they can choose to do with them what they want. That doesn't negate the role that institutional donors can play, but alongside that, there's a need for flexible and nimble support. Thank you.
Anybody else like to come in and comment at that point? Or has it been thoroughly aired? Okay, one here. Say who you are.
I'm Stephen Brown from the University of Ottawa. I've been looking at these issues of alignment, harmonization, and ownership in numerous countries. And the question that was just posed emphasizes that, that it's development partners that don't want to implement these policies. And the answers have focused more on the aligning, using country systems aspect. But I think it's important to recognize also that developing country governments don't always want to implement them either. For instance, if there's a lot of harmonization, it's harder for a developing country to shop around. And I mean, there's a certain advantage to bilateralizing the relationships and not having donors speaking with one voice. So I think it's important in these discussions to remember that there are incentives on both sides that work against these principles.
And would you agree with that? So that there are some advantages to not being harmonized?
Yes, yes, I agree on that, but when you look at all the commitments developing countries have made, as you rightly said, it also depends on us to see how we get the new actors and the new players to also use the principles that we have. What are we doing in Ghana when it comes to like our dealings with China? We have this local content policy. It's part of country systems where we ensure that, yes, you're giving us export credits, you're giving us concessional financing, but we want you to use, in terms of consultants, in terms of workers to support project implementation, we ask that you should use local content. If you're unable to find maybe good consultants in country, that is where then you can bring them from China. Or better still, what we do is that we agree on percentages. That yes, this percentage of consultants should come from China, and we will also use maybe our labor force, etc., to support the project. So yes, on bilateral, I agree, but some countries like us, we are trying to use the aid effectiveness principles effectively. So I think it's also based on the capacity of recipient countries to see how we can also apply that to the new players. When we don't get the multilateral forum, but we are dealing on bilateral, we should also start using that. And it's taken a while, we understand how aid works, but gradually we are also pushing our agenda to make sure that we also benefit from the assistance that is coming in. Yeah.
Okay, so the next question that most people want answered is, shouldn't we spend some time on evidence about the power, politics, institutions and ideas that have kept donors and developing partners from implementing agreed principles and policies? Quite a big question there, Hein. I don't know if you want to just give us your sort of quick thoughts on that. Do we have enough evidence about what hasn't worked before we set in about thinking about what changes we want to make?
I think our involvement with the global processes such as the Paris Declaration, Accra, then Busan have produced quite solid evidence as to what actually works and what are the challenges for making aid more effective. And I think in rounds after rounds of monitoring have shown that progress has been uneven. So we seem to have made progress on some specific indicators, while some we don't. And this have implications also for both partner countries and donors. So now, as the second high-level meeting is approaching, I think the international community has to come up with a clear message as to whether there is still sustained commitment to implementing the unfinished agendas of Paris and Accra before, at the same time, moving on with new commitments. So there must be strong commitments about this, and all stakeholders, I think all partners, need to ensure that commitments they make needs to be translated and sufficiently enabled to be implemented on the ground. I think this is very important.
So can I just ask those of you who voted for the question, or even whoever asked for it, why did you feel this was so important? I mean, Haynes basically said, we kind of know. Just one point there, I think, and one point. If you want to make just some quick points, and then we can bring Yvonne in.
My name is Khoshal Wakili, and I've researched the concept of mutual accountability in context.
Can you just say who you are, please?
My name is Khoshal Wakili. I'm a development consultant, and I have researched the concept of mutual accountability in context of aid delivered to Afghanistan. I think the earlier question and this question, and I have also put the question, they are very relevant, like how to translate commitments into actual implementation. Like that's the key question. And what I found out in my research was that in order to translate commitments into to get them implemented, there should be a legislative follow-up, or at least a follow-up that needs to be translated into procedures that come from headquarters to the donor staff, so that they follow it, so that commitments don't remain only on paper, which at the moment, I mean, they show up on statistics. We tick boxes according to the surveys, but in reality, if there is no parliamentary involvement, both on donor countries and on the recipient countries, it will be very difficult to translate commitments into regulations or to procedures.
Okay, that's a good point, and actually several of you have voted for that, so I am actually going to ask Yvonne and Hein to pick that up, but also here.
Warm-up from Muslim Aid. I'd just like to ask this issue of ownership, particularly in fragile states. I was working in Afghanistan when 11 ministers were impeached by Parliament for being unable to spend 40% of their budget. So there is a lack of capacity in some countries. How do we overcome that issue of ownership where the government doesn't have the capacity to perform? That's my question.
Right, okay. Actually, I would like to ask, I believe we've got Helder da Costa from the G7 Plus Secretariat to is somebody who could maybe pick up that question on the fragile states. You know, how do we help countries that don't have capacity? So maybe if you could respond to that question.
Thank you. I'm Helder Costa, the General Secretary of the G7+, a group of 20 fragile and post-conflict affected states. Right, thank you. I was waiting for the next lot of questions because it does come up.
We can jump into
on
your
fragile
session.
states, but let me just quickly reflect on Lebeau's question. I think there is no one-size-fits-all here in this whole arena of aid effectiveness development. You know, you have developed country, you have middle-income country, you have LDC, and you also have fragile states. We all have different capacities in terms of governance. But I do understand your point. The question here is that how can we strengthen the capacity of the government in fragile states? I think the key word, sir, is that you need to associate with the local champions. What I mean by local champions is that there are governments that are really, really committed to deliver service to the people. But the reality on the ground, that's what the next question is coming up, the politics, the structure, about weak political system and so on. It's a fact. The reason why the governments in fragile states, they are not able to deliver the service because of we are battling with the so-called peace and security, instability in our country. That's why we push for the agenda, goal number 16, on peace, building peaceful societies, building strong institutions so that you can deliver the service to the people. That is our. Now you mentioned about the Afghanistan. I think that has been a few years ago. But recently, the G7+ held its 4th ministerial meeting in Afghanistan, in Kabul, in March this year. And President Ashraf Ghani made it very, very eloquently that let's not try to use the traditional donors and conditionality and so on, but let's look at the country-specific context, what challenge we face, so that we can ask the donors to be able to help us. Otherwise, back to the results that Annalise was presenting before, the speed of service delivery, if the traditional donors are not able to deliver it, believe me, the fragile and conflict-affected states, together with the other developing countries in Southeast Asia, Pacific, and Africa, will look to the east, in particular China. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And just thinking about Nairobi, do you think enough of that is on the agenda for Nairobi, that there is likely to be the kind of focus on fragile states that actually you say is needed?
Thank you. For the Nairobi, our group is yet to look at the Nairobi outcome document. Mm-hmm. But there are some encouraging signs that the plight for those countries are starting to be reflected in the Nairobi outcome document. That's a good thing. But for us, I'd like to say this. For those who hold the pen for the Nairobi outcome document is this, that in the spirit of leaving no one behind, we're not talking about marginalized groups, but we'll discuss this tomorrow. But for us, the most important thing is that how you build strong institutions at the country level. We came with a simple notion that there is no peace without development, and there can be no development without peace. But if I may add, in terms of institutions, building institutions, there will be no service to the people at the country level, subnational level, at the rural level, without strong and capable institutions. The situation in Sierra Leone shows us a lot. Had they had the strong institutions, the Ebola crisis could have been aborted. Mm-hmm. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to quickly answer that question that you posed over there, because it has come through, not as one of our top ones. Let me just keep on trying to get my thing to work. It's this: can we include legislative follow-up to aid effectiveness commitments in donor and aid countries? What else can be done to implement the commitments? Basically, should you legislate for these commitments? What do you think about that idea at country level, Yvonne?
Okay, thank you. For us, what we have done now is, in terms of our financing strategies, we've now put them as part of our PFM law. When it comes to, because they are part of budget support, a country may have to use both domestic and external resources. So the external resources that we have our partners committee is part of what? Our budget that goes to what? Parliament. And that is where we get what? Appropriation. So this commitment, if they've committed and they are unable to deliver on those commitments, then we have a what? A financing gap. How do we finance those gaps? And that is where then you have countries resorting to domestic borrowing, etc. Either domestic borrowing, or you look for other sources of financing, or better still, you reduce expenditure. But then you realize it's not really worked for us. So what is happening now is that as part of our new PFM law that we passed in 2016, we are encouraging that commitment that donors have made in terms of support to the budget or in terms of project financing, etc. We engage them and we are trying to be proactive so that they implement on that.
What about this idea, though, that it's legislative action that's needed? So, like Annalisa was saying, some things are popular in the principle, some things are not so popular at country level, like, for example, transparency and tithing. Could you ever foresee a situation where the government of Ghana would say, okay, let's just pass a law saying we are going to adopt these principles?
We've not had a lot of discussions have been made, and I think governments have made commitments. What we've currently done is the loan side, right? And apart from that, the new PFM law, in terms of transparency, in terms of accountability, we have an audit, internal audit. We have an auditor general that by constitution is supposed to audit all funds that come in through the consolidated fund. Aside that, the new PFM law and the debt management functions that we have incorporated in the new PF law requires that we report on all funding, both external and domestic. It requires that we report and we give details of how those funds have been used, and it also requires that the Ghana Audit Service audits and submits to Parliament. What we've also done in the past, and I think that new PFM law has strengthened that, is that once the Auditor General publishes the accounts, you have various MDAs, you have various ministry department agencies going to face the Public Accounts Committee to justify where there are challenges, etc.
So there are strong transparency.
There are strong, but in terms of, I think it's rather in terms of, there isn't much talk about why didn't this donor disburse or so, but I think it's another level that we have to start moving.
Okay, so let's have a look at the next question. Will the Leave No One Behind agenda be left behind because it's too hard? Let me quickly just check in with Heng on that, and then maybe I could ask some of you who asked the question or supported it to give us some of your reflections on it. What do you think?
I think no.
Okay, that's very straightforward.
Because as the 2030 agenda has said, this is based on the universal principles of human dignity and human rights. So this is a globally accepted principle that countries, all actors need to work hard to ensure that everyone will be included. So I don't think we need to abandon anything just because it is too hard. Instead, we need to step up our commitments, our effort to achieve those common goals.
And practically in Cambodia, how actually are you aiming to reach those who are the most marginalized? Maybe just give us one example of the types of things that proactively you're doing.
At present time, the royal government of Cambodia is looking into localizing this SDG agenda into the national policies. So And I'm sure the Leave No One Behind agenda will feature very prominently in the government's national framework. So we have been looking at how to target the most marginalized and most vulnerable groups in society, such as women and children, especially those who live in the rural areas, remote and rural areas. So, but I think doing that is also challenging in terms of resource and capacity, and also participation from all stakeholders. But overall, in the end, the government has the responsibility to include everyone.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so 13 people voted for it and somebody asked it, so maybe we could just have some thoughts from you just about whether you actually think this is going to be taken up, or is it, as the question says, just too hard? Over there?
Armand Henri de l'Argenté from France again. I have my own personal theory on this, which is that the MDGs would have gone unnoticed if there hadn't been the Twin Tower episode. And it's because the Twin Tower episode happened that the world got together at Monterey and decided that, after all, aid was necessary, but it better be effective.
Okay, so just on the question, the Leave No One Behind agenda, what do you think is going to happen with that?
I think on this one, we are in a similar situation because we are experiencing politics of anger by those who are left behind. Mm-hmm. And therefore, I mean, look at the American presidential campaign, look at Brexit. In my country, look at terrorism coming from the banlieue, where people are left behind. We cannot afford to leave people behind.
Okay, so that's a good point, and in support of the agenda and the need to pursue it. So we're just in the last couple of minutes, and I just want to take one more question. So even if recipient governments are not much concerned with tide aid, should it stay in the global partnership because donors ought to care about value for money? So, what do you think? Well, first of all, I guess the question is, are you concerned about tide aid?
In Cambodia, we have made progress with regard to untying aid. There's actual progress on the ground, and that's should be good news.
What have you done?
So, so far, development partners have been supportive of this initiative, and over the last 5 years, the percentage of aid that is untied has increased. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one.
Okay, and do you think that, you know, obviously recipient countries, but donors should continue to be concerned about tide aid, that is something that the Nairobi meeting must address?
I think over time there will be a realization that all the principles of aid effectiveness needs to be implemented fully for the benefit of development on the ground. And that's why we continue to see progress on various dimensions, although uneven and slow, but there's still progress. And I think the GPEDC as a platform has its advantages, not just with regard to addressing the issue of tide aid, but it's a platform where stakeholders can come together and forge a consensus to move forward. I think this is much more important than addressing one specific issue.
And that's a good note to end on as well. Yvonne, just to tackle this question of tide aid, what did actually come out from Annalisa's research, that actually this wasn't an issue that actually concerned recipient countries that much. How does it play out in Ghana?
Thank you very much. I think it concerns us because it's one of the issues that we raise. And that is why in our procurement law, what we are saying is we look at all those options. And if there is sole sourcing or tied aid, we do value for money analysis where you have independent consultants having to do those value for money analysis. So we are still interested in the untied aid because that's our preference before we move to the tied aid. But I think that we have donors or development partners that are untying their aid. So we are encouraging others to also do that. So we are still interested and we think it should be part of the Nairobi agenda.
And just quickly, in a word from both of you, are you optimistic that Nairobi will be useful, will help you at country level with donors and with aid flows? Yvonne, a word, or maybe two.
Okay, I am very optimistic about that because when you look at the study that was done, one of the recommendations for recipient countries was for us to play the field, where they're saying that, so playing the field, we are utilizing all sources of finance optimally. But then the challenge we are facing as a middle income, lower middle income country is that we still have that middle missing financing. And we should all take note that a lot of the post-HIPPY countries are also moving to middle income status. So we should take that seriously and see how our issues will be addressed in terms of public finance.
And what about you? Optimistic?
Yes, as we go to Nairobi, I would want to see more emphasis on stronger government ownership, new and innovative approaches to development, so new and do development differently, and I think commitments in Nairobi should cascade or should enable partner countries to mobilize more resources.
To fill the funding gap, as Yvonne was talking about. Well, I'd just like to say thank you very much to our two panelists for taking a really wide range of diverse questions. Yvonne Kwanzaa and Hen Chu, thank you very much, and also Annalisa earlier, and all three will be around later. We didn't get to answer all the questions. That's the disadvantage of Pigeonhole, but the advantage is you can see what the questions were, and you can discuss them either with our panelists or with Annalisa or amongst yourselves later. But thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of the conference.